As the temps start rising, I feel the familiar urge to refresh my closet, but I don't want to waste money on pieces I'll only wear once or for just one season. Thankfully, Quince changes that. Their clothes are timeless, lightweight, and far more elevated than anything else at this price. It finally feels like my wardrobe matches my standards. The best part is that Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices and premium fabrics and finishes, so you get to look good while feeling good. I'm pretty excited that I have upgraded my athleisure wardrobe for this summer. I bought a sweatshirt and a pair of wide-leg flow pants that are two of the softest items I own, and I plan to live in them. So join me in giving your summer closet an upgrade with Quince. Go to quince.com/POTC for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/POTC to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/POTC.
We live in a really appearance-focused world. So when we look to the world around us and be like, okay, how do I fit in? How do I belong? We get these messages of, if your body looks this way, you're more likely to be liked and belong. And if it looks this other way, if you're larger, then you're not going to be liked and you're not going to belong. So with that natural yearning of, I want to be connected to people, of course we feel that strong pull of, I need to change myself in order to belong. In order for me to be liked and connected to people, I need to change my body. And the problem with that is anytime we change ourselves in order to belong, it kind of runs against belonging, because belonging is about being seen for who we are and accepted.
That was Sarah Pegrum on Psychologists Off the Clock.
We are four experts in psychology here to bring you cutting-edge and science-based ideas from psychology to help you flourish in your relationships, work, and health.
I'm Dr. Debbie Sorensen, a clinical psychologist practicing in Mile High, Denver, Colorado, and author of Act for Burnout, Act Daily Journal, and the Act Daily Card Deck.
From America's Heartland, I'm Dr. Emily Edlin, a clinical psychologist based in Chicago, Illinois, and author of Autonomy Supportive Parenting.
Calling in from Vienna, Austria, I'm Michael Herold, ACT coach, confidence trainer, and author of an upcoming book on being a better conversationalist and making friends.
And from coastal New England, I'm Dr. Jill Stoddard, author of Be Mighty, The Big Book of ACT Metaphors, and Imposter No More.
We hope you take what you learn here to build a rich and meaningful life.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock.
Hi, this is Debbie. I'm here with Emily today to introduce our interview for today, which is with Dr. Sarah Pegrum, who has a brand new book out. It's called Break the Binds of Weight Stigma, Free Yourself from Body Image Struggles Using Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. I think reading her book and then also talking with her really gave me a lot to think about in terms of just such a common struggle that so many of us share related to our bodies and how we think and feel about our bodies, and how there's a lot happening on the cultural level with that. And so, Emily, I know you took a listen to the interview, and I'm really curious what you have to say about the conversation.
Yeah, so I was really excited to have this topic covered. I personally have been becoming much more aware through really working against this anti-fat bias in our society. I've realized how much I have not understood or paid attention to the role of how we treat our bodies in this culture, how we look at other bodies, and what all that brings up. One quote I really loved was when Sarah talked about our body is not a problem to be solved, and that really is the messaging everywhere, from the wellness industry making a lot of money off of the idea of us trying to have the quote unquote ideal body. And even the health industry, I work as a health psychologist, and I work with people who face anti-fat bias at their doctor's visits. And that weight stigma has really serious consequences for their health care. And I just think it's a really important issue that we all need to be more aware of on every level. So I was curious what you thought of the conversation.
I think it's really similar. I think I've been learning a lot about this recently myself and trying to be more aware of how implicit it is in the world around us, how much I grew up with these kinds of messages, and had to check in with myself about, am I perpetuating this within my own self and in the world? And I think I've come a long way with it. And I think it's really helpful. And one of the things I just think is so important around this is this sense of shame that people have. And I mean, who doesn't? I mean, I think it's probably a rare person who has never, if I talked about body shame, weight shame, like there's this feeling of you're not doing enough. You're not, your body is never going to be, quote, good enough if you go by society standards. It doesn't matter. And so I think people really experience severe shame around this. And that idea that these cultural messages just increase shame. And then what do people do when they're in that place of shaming? I mean, it can be really important to be aware of that, because when shame is strong, it can drive all kinds of, just suffering in our lives. And it can also get us into some behavior patterns that aren't healthy for us. And so anyway, to me, the whole thing, it's all about being aware of it. And I think the more you start to pay attention to these narratives and see how damaging some of them can be, it's helpful.
Yeah. And we're all doing it all the time in many ways. If we even comment on, oh, you look great after may have lost a few pounds, and to realize we don't know what's going on with that person and what was part of that weight loss. And it continues the messaging that smaller bodies are better. And I just think we all need to start questioning that. I mean, a huge paradigm shift for me as I'm paying more attention to this issue is the idea, and I know Sarah put in quotes, obesity epidemic, and really questioning the science and what kind of stigma might be in the science that we're all absorbing, that obesity is causing all of these terrible health conditions and why we have to fight against it. When digging into the science, you can see it's a lot more complicated and nuanced than that. So I think that's really important to start kind of questioning a lot of assumptions that we've absorbed that end up perpetuating stigma behaviors and self-criticism, and all of it on every level.
Yeah. And there's a lot, I think, in how we talk about these kinds of things. It's certainly hard to talk about. It can be very polarizing. People have strong opinions on all sides of it. But I do think that there are ways to talk about issues that are going to feed the shame. And I think a lot about, okay, how do I talk about this with my own daughters? I have my kids, right? I have an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old daughter. So kind of in that tween phase. And I think we talk a lot about bodies come in different shapes and sizes, and let's not comment on people's bodies. Let's not focus on that. Like we don't want to be complimenting people when they lost 5 pounds. We also don't want to be talking about people's bodies in a negative way. People's bodies are really different. And I just think that's really different than how I grew up hearing about and learning about people's bodies. And in a way, when I think about that, it makes me so sad to think about what I learned about way back in the 80s and the way that people talked about bodies then.
80s diet culture has imprinted on many of us who are parenting now. And I think, so we grew up with especially mothers vulnerable to the 80s diet culture. And we were getting messages. I remember non-fat cheese in my house, which is disgusting. Like, who wants to eat non-fat cheese? Where's the joy in eating that cheese?
Yes.
So I think it's such a fine line with our own kids of how we're messaging around like balanced ways of eating and having a relationship with food and with our bodies. It's really tricky. And you and Sarah do touch on the parenting piece, which I really appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for me, that's my hope. I want to teach them to take care of their bodies and also to have more of that acceptance around different body sizes. And it's tricky. So I really appreciate Sarah coming on the podcast and talking to us about this and all about her terrific book. So we hope you enjoy the conversation too. My guest today, Dr. Sarah Pegrum, is a clinical psychologist and ACT peer-reviewed trainer currently based in St. John's, Newfoundland. She's been researching and practicing in the field of body image, weight stigma, and eating disorders for over 15 years. She's also passionate about sharing information and training others in body image, weight stigma, and eating disorders, as well as in acceptance and commitment therapy. She is the author of the book, Break the Binds of Weight Stigma, Free Yourself from Body Image Struggles Using Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. Sarah, welcome to the podcast. I'm so happy that you're here.
Oh, thank you for having me here. It's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, we've had the pleasure of meeting each other in person before at ACBS conferences, and we're both kind of writing acceptance and commitment therapy books at around the same time and have kind of gotten to know each other a little bit. So I'm really excited to talk to you about your book today.
Yes, we're on sort of similar journey of the writing process.
Yes. And I actually want to dive in and talk to you a little bit about the writing process to start out with here.
Sure.
Okay, great. So I think, you wrote this book and it's about weight stigma, body image, the impact of diet culture, that kind of thing. And you acknowledge in the book a few times that it's a bit scary to put yourself out there and write this book. I've also noticed that people have very strong opinions when it comes to weight loss, weight stigma, this movement to be more aware of weight-related stigma. And so I was just curious if you could tell us a little bit about what it's like to put this book out into the world and some of your fears in being a voice on this particular topic.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, and I think for a lot of people, regardless of what the topic is, having a voice and putting yourself out there brings up a lot of fears. It is scary. There's kind of like a vulnerability to it. And, I know throughout the writing and publishing sort of journey, I've had many moments where there's definitely been those fears there, that vulnerability. And thankfully, I'm surrounded by a number of very supportive people who kind of keep me grounded and remind me of yes, it's scary. Yes, it's vulnerable. And this topic is important to you and it's meaningful. So keep going. Yes, it's hard and, keep going because it's important to you. So sort of that more general level, there's definitely sort of those fears in being seen. But then specifically with this topic, I agree. I've also kind of been watching kind of what's happening in the field and you see different people's reactions to it. And I think weight is a very loaded topic. We've come to attach so much to it and it's such a part of our discourse. It's really hard to go a day without kind of encountering people making comments about weight, whether it's commenting on this person gained weight, this person lost weight, or, seeing things in our media feeds or seeing things online or, pushing the latest diet or exercise or drug or whatever it is, or seeing things in the media of, that portray bodies of different sizes in different ways. It's so part of the world that we live in. And we've kind of built a way of interacting with the world based on that. So to start to ask questions of, hey, maybe the assumptions or maybe the information that underpins some of this stuff isn't accurate or it's not helpful or it may even be harmful, it's quite a perspective shift for people. And with that perspective shift can bring a whole heap of emotions and a whole heap of different reactions. So I guess sort of there's a fear of what are people's reactions going to be, knowing that I am pushing on a topic that is quite loaded.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, first of all, thinking back about the years we've been doing the podcast and some of the different topics we've covered related to this and how they've changed. And I think my perspective has changed on this. I've learned more. I've taken a look at some of the things I learned growing up, and I know many people have. I feel like the narrative is shifting, but it is still so heated. People have strong opinions. I was thinking about a conversation I had with someone where I was sort of noticing some weight stigma and associated shame. And the person's response, he was basically like, well, if I don't have that, I'm going to be lazy. And I mean, it was just so heated. And I thought, wow, I mean, this is even, I think sometimes for people who have experienced it in a painful way, there's almost this reluctance to take a look at weight stigma in a more social justice kind of way. Maybe, I don't know if that's the right way to phrase that.
Yeah, and when I see it, like, because you can see it at, sometimes it's at that individual level of the person having that kind of response of, well, if I'm not focused on this, what does that mean? Does that mean the pendulum's going to swing the other way and I'm going to lose control? But then you also see it at that broader societal level, like I've seen sort of some of the reactions of, well, if we're embracing body acceptance, then that means, again, people are going to get out of control. They're going to gain weight. They're going to have all these health problems, and they're going to be a burden on the healthcare system and supporting obesity. And it just sort of spirals really, really, really quickly. So there's that reaction happening kind of at multiple levels. And I think it does speak to how entrenched weight stigma is. And I think people get scared when you propose of, hey, maybe we're taking or reducing something. Then people get worried of, well, if you take that away from me, what's going to happen next? Or if we take this away from society, what's going to happen next? And I try to be mindful of that throughout. The book is that I understand that asking these questions can be scary, and is that if I take that away, what's going to happen next?
That's a really good point. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to get to some of the fundamentals here because, a lot of your book is about weight stigma, which happens in a cultural context. Let's talk a little bit about what's out there. What is weight stigma and what are we seeing just in the media, in casual conversations about how we talk about bodies?
Yeah. So in the book, I refer to weight stigma in probably the most broadest sense you can. Weight stigma refers to kind of the social stereotyping, I guess, of body and weight. So conveying people or bodies of different size in a very sort of stereotyped way. And we often see that in relation to people who are larger. So I kind of refer to weight stigma in a broad sense of messages we are surrounded by that convey that a particular body is good and another particular body is bad, and the associations attached with it. So that's, I use in a very broad sense. I guess sort of when I talk to people about, what is out there, and when I bring it to different talks and different discussions, it often turns quite lively because lots of people have lots of experiences to share of, oh, what about this and what about that? When I tell people what I do and what my area of specialty is, I work in body image and eating disorders and weight stigma, one of the most common reactions I get is, oh, social media. And I do want to acknowledge, absolutely, social media does have a big impact on people, and depending on what they're following and the algorithms, it can be really, really destructive. But these struggles that we see with body image and weight stigma and weight discrimination, they were happening long before social media. So social media is it's a new phenomenon that's kind of influencing us. But this was happening long before that, whether we're looking at a historical level or individual level. This has been going on for a lot longer. I think even in my time of looking at eating disorders and body image, yes, there's been more recently looking at social media. But when I first started looking at it, people were talking about magazines and the Photoshop and editing of magazines. And before that, they were talking about the models on the runway and sort of the portrayal of people in sort of movies and TV shows. And if we go way, way back to the origins of kind of fat phobia, there is kind of this racial undertone to it as well. And there's some fantastic literature that speaks more to that historical side of it. So this is historically, this has been going on long before social media. But even if we look at the individual level, a child is, kind of part of a family. Often the family is their first exposure to weight stigma or weight-related messages. They might be born into a family or they become part of a family where one or both of the parents are engaging in dieting, and they might be having conversations about their bodies, or they might be talking about other people's body. When I think of my own kind of upbringing, my mum was a larger woman, and I remember people making comments about her body and jokes about her body and other people who were her size or larger. So they'd make comments and jokes about that, and then the people who were smaller, they'd kind of celebrate that. So at that family level, we start to learn and absorb these messages of this body is seen as good, while this body is seen as bad. And then even when we look at children's programming and it continues into general programming, bigger bodies are not shown frequently. And when they are shown, it's often in a negative light. So they're portrayed as kind of unhealthy or lazy, or they're poked fun at, or they're the villain. Like what comes to mind is, some of the Disney movies is, the villain is someone who is larger, while the character that everyone wants to be like is, the tiny little princess. So again, like even as a child, we're starting to be exposed to these messages. Then we go out into the world, we go to school, and then we might see people teasing other kids because of their size, or when it's time to pick groups or, sport or gym class, the last kid who's picked is the bigger child. So again, we start to learn of, okay, people like this body type and they don't like this one. And we start to, form associations of this is good, this is bad, this body is healthy, this body is unhealthy. And it kind of builds and builds on that. And as we get older, we get more and more influences, and social media becomes part of that influence. But then we also have like diet industry, fitness industry. When we're kind of hitting sexual maturity, all of a sudden we're having to deal with dating and all of that. So it just kind of keeps adding and adding and adding and layering on top of each other of these constant messages of which bodies are acceptable and which bodies aren't.
Yeah. And I think your point about social media, I mean, this is nothing new, and things change. If I think about the ideal body type, I'm using air quotes, the society's ideal body type from when I was a child to now in my late 40s, like it does change. It's not better or worse, but it's like this in some ways, actually, at least with social media, there is the other side of this conversation about more body acceptance and sort of pointing out some of these things. So you really can't, it's so true. You really can't blame social media. These kind of subtle and not so subtle messages have been there a very long time.
Very long. Yeah. And I think sort of social media, like you're right of them, there is a lot of stuff, just like there's a lot of negative stuff out there. There's also stuff out there that is in that body acceptance, body positivity, and you can cultivate your feed so that it's uplifting as opposed to kind of impacting like yourself in a negative way. So I think as much as social media does get a bad rap, sometimes we can tinker it so that it can be helpful more than harmful.
Well, speaking of those subtle weight stigma messages, one thing that I'm really personally fascinated by is diet culture is now considered, you don't want to be pro diet culture anymore, right? Like I think we've all learned that that's not super helpful for most people. And yet I think within the fitness and wellness industry, often there's a very subtle version of this where it's in the guise of health, but it's actually pretty much the same thing, just repackaged. Like people aren't saying, oh, you should go on a diet anymore. But there's like this, do you know what I mean? There's this kind of wellness, fitness, kind of healthy eating kind of vibe, but it has the same message. I think it's just repackaged. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, like I think sort of years ago, there was more of that push of diets and weight loss, and diet wasn't seen as a bad word. But over the years, we know that diet generally they don't work, so they've kind of got a bad rap. Of course, if you're an organization or a company who is based on selling a diet, you're going to have to do something about that if you want to keep getting money coming in. So it has led to kind of a repackaging, rebranding, a lot of these different programs. They're the same programs that were kicking around sort of 20 odd years ago, but it's got a new label on it, and the label that is more acceptable and palatable for people now is more of that wellness or lifestyle, but they're still putting forward this sense of your body is a problem that needs to be fixed. And it's still putting forward that, okay, here's a before picture, and we're looking at sort of different things. It's like, oh, geez, I look like the before picture. And they put that image forward, and then it's a sense of, well, you have to fix that. You have to do something about it. And if you pay the right amount of money, we'll tell you what you need to do and just stick with it, and you'll lose weight and all the doors will open and everything will be fantastic for you. And I think the discussion around, again, using air quotes, the obesity epidemic has fueled a lot of that as well, because it's created a lot of fear around health and body. So sort of people want to be healthy, they want to be living their lives, they want to be living long lives, and they are scared of being not healthy, and that's increasingly being tied to their weight. So sort of different industries have really kind of jumped on that and used that to push sales of, if you do this, you're going to lose weight and you're going to be healthy.
Mm-hmm. Well, I imagine there aren't going to be very many listeners out there who are hearing this conversation who have never experienced this weight stigma, this, fat talk, this kind of your body is a problem type of narrative. I mean, it's just pervasive. Could you talk a bit about how does that stigma impact people? What's the effect on people's mental and physical health when they're just getting that message in so many different ways?
It has a huge impact, and sometimes we're aware of it because it's more clear. Other times we're not as aware of it, and it's only when we're having these kinds of conversations that we go, oh, I do that, or I think that, or oh, I hadn't played it forward to see how it impacts me. So it does have a big impact. But when we're surrounded by these messages that, this body is a good body and this body is a bad body, we naturally kind of then look at our own body and look up to that and be like, okay, where do I fit in relation to this? And if our body lands in the acceptable range, then we almost have that sense of, well, I have to keep it that way. And if we notice that we're creeping along and our body is landing more to the unacceptable, which is the bulk of us actually kind of fall into that, we look at our body and go, oh, that's not good. And most of the time, it doesn't stay just there. It's not like, oh, I don't like how my stomach looks or my legs look, and that's it, and I carry on about my day. Most of the time when people look at their body, like whether they're looking in the mirror, they're jumping on the scale, or they're trying clothes on, they'll have a body-related thought of, oh, I don't like that. Oh, I'm fat, I'm this, I'm that. And then it starts to spiral, because we attach weight to so much. So usually the things that start to come in is, I'm a failure. I'm not good enough. What are people going to think of me? People are going to think I'm unhealthy. People aren't going to like me. People aren't going to see me as desirable. What if my partner leaves me? What if I can't get a partner? What if I develop all these health conditions? And our minds just spiral, and how we view ourselves and how we think others view us starts to come in. And the more we go in that direction, the more we kind of get that emotional reaction. Like, even as I'm saying out loud, I can feel my own body being like, oh, that's uncomfortable stuff. So it's not unusual. The more people head down that pathway and have those struggles, we see their self-esteem and their body image plummet. They really don't feel good about their body. They don't feel good about themselves. And we also see at those emotional level, we see sort of depression, we see anxiety, we see eating disorders. So all of that is more common the more we're heading down kind of that rabbit hole. So it's impacting at sort of that psychological level, but it also impacts at a physical level. So for people who are in a larger body, chances are they've experienced weight discrimination. Chances are they've had to navigate the world in a different way. Like, they're having to be like, if I go out for a coffee with my friend, I have to be selective of where I go because I'm not sure if the seating's going to be okay for me. So even sort of those sorts of things come to mind. So when they're having to leave the house, of course they get stressed. It's like, what am I going to have to deal with when I leave the house? Am I going to face some sort of microaggression? What sort of environmental stuff am I going to have to deal with? And when they're in that stress response, that activates a lot of different physiological processes. And what the research is kind of exploring and gaining more of an understanding of now is, the more we're in that stress response, and if we're in it for a prolonged period of time, that really does impact the body. And we're seeing a number of health conditions associated with being in that prolonged state of stress. So it starts to hit people at a physical level as well, and then at a behavior level of people change what they're doing because of how they're thinking and feeling about their body. And it might be something like, well, I'm not going to wear that particular outfit because it's not flattering. Or it could be, I'm not going to go to that event. I'm not going to put myself out there, or I can't do that until I lose weight. So it has multiple impacts.
So people avoid certain things or they feel stressed about that potential discrimination. Do you think that fuels, because one thing I think sometimes when people have like almost an emotional eating pattern, sometimes it kind of fuels that too, right? They get into this place of shame. And I've just seen that sometimes with people where it's almost like the key to this is that then I'm going to lose weight so that I can be more acceptable. That doesn't work, right? I mean, for so many reasons, one of which is the cycle of shame, right?
Yeah, and I think we come by that response quite honestly, because, in part of these messages and, sort of certain shows are coming to mind even as I'm talking, there is almost this sense of kind of shame people into motivation. If you shame them enough, if you point this out, if you make them feel bad enough about this, then that will motivate them to do something about it. And we see it in relation to weight, but we've also seen it in relation to addictions. And what we've learned from these fields is shame is a really poor motivator. It often has the opposite effect. So whether we've got other people making comments to try and shame us into action, or we're doing it ourselves, or we're trying to, I guess, bully ourselves into being more motivated, it actually ends up having the opposite effect. It creates a lot of distress, it creates a lot of shame, and what we've noticed is that people are less likely to engage in behaviors that are helpful and healthy, and they're more likely to engage in behaviors that are more destructive. So you might see sort of like some of that more emotional eating, or really struggling to be physically active because of the shame attached to it. So it's really a common strategy that people turn to, whether it's to motivate others or internally, but it's a really, really ineffective strategy, and it tends to have the opposite effect.
Yeah. And there's one more piece of what you were just saying that I want to go back to. I was actually planning to ask you this later, but it just fits right in with what you were saying, which was, it has to do with belonging and that feeling of what are people going to think of me? And I think that's a piece of the weight stigma part that is really profound too, that I think has to be acknowledged. Could you just say a few words about that sense of belonging and fitting in and how that ties to weight stigma?
Yeah, I think when I was originally looking at writing this book, I didn't have the chapter on belonging in there, but it kept on coming up. And I kept on seeing it clinically. It kept on coming up in discussions and things like that. So I'm like, I can't not speak to belonging. And as humans, we're social creatures. We have this yearning. We want to belong. We want to feel seen for who we are and accepted. We want to have that. It's kind of at a thinking level, but there's almost this feeling level of this warmth of, you see me for who I am and you're not pushing me away. You're not rejecting me. I feel warm. I feel accepted. And we have this yearning for that, understandably so. And when we're thinking about belonging, our mind goes to, okay, let's look at the world around us and see what do we need to do in order to belong in a group. And we live in a really appearance-focused world. So when we look to the world around us and be like, okay, how do I fit in? How do I belong? What do I need to do? We get these messages of, if your body looks this way, you're more likely to be liked and belong. And if it looks this other way, if you're larger, then you're not going to be liked and you're not going to belong. So with that natural yearning of, I want to be connected to people and I want to belong, of course we feel that strong pull of, I need to change myself in order to belong. In order for me to be liked and connected to people, I need to change my body. And the problem with that is, anytime we change ourselves in order to belong, it kind of runs against belonging, because belonging is about being seen for who we are and accepted. So if we have to change who we are, whether it's who we are at a personality level or how we physically look, in order to belong, we're not really belonging. We're just fitting in. And so Brene Brown has done some great stuff in that sort of belonging, fitting in sort of area. But that's what I see in relation to body image and weight stigma. When people are wanting to lose weight, a lot of the time it's coming from, I want to belong, I want to connect. And in the world that we live in, it's constantly thrown at us of, you have to be a certain weight to belong and connect. And in looking at this stuff, it's hard to put it out there of, is that accurate? Is that assumption of, I have to change my body in order to connect, in order to belong? How accurate is that? And maybe we can get that sense of belonging or that sense of connection without having to change who we are, whether it's physically or at a personality level. How can we connect with each other without having to kind of go to extremes with our bodies?
Yeah, to be accepted as we are without having to try so hard to be socially acceptable and to try to fit in. Yeah. One thing that happens, you write that parents can inadvertently contribute to that idea of shame and weight stigma and body image issues, often coming from a place of wanting their kids to belong, wanting kids to fit in, wanting kids to be healthy and have a good life. But sometimes that really has the opposite effect. And you have exercises in your book, like really personal, really powerful exercises. One of the most powerful exercises to me was looking at your personal history related to the messages that each reader got growing up. And actually, as I was reading it, I noticed a lot of my own history that I wasn't really thinking much about, just in terms of messages and that kind of thing. And again, to tie it to parents, I think so often it comes from not necessarily a place of parents trying to be harsh on kids or shaming them, but it's kind of an inadvertent thing. So yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts you wanted to share on that idea, right? On people's personal learning history around this.
I think when we're looking at our own personal history, and there's exercises in the book where I encourage people to do that because we've all had different experiences. I think sometimes we can get pulled into this almost like shaming, blaming of, my parents did this sort of thing. And I think it's important to step back a little bit and recognize that all of us have been surrounded by these messages, and these messages about body and weight, they may have changed a little bit over time, or the vessel in which they're coming at us may have changed over time, but they've been there for a long time. So when we look at our own experiences and, I remember in my childhood, this is what I saw, chances are our parents and the people around us had also been exposed to different messages. And chances are they had their own experiences with their own body, and the things that they said or did or the messages they conveyed probably came out of that space. So they themselves may have been bullied because they were a larger size as a kid. So they're like, that was really painful for me. I don't want my child to experience that. So what can I do? Or they're surrounded by messages that's, talking about health and weight. And they look at their child and they get scared because they don't want their child to experience any kind of health issues. So again, they might say messages about their body. And so the messages that come through, often they might not be the best messages, but they're often coming from a place of good intent. And I think as people are then having kids themselves and then reflecting on their own journey and be like, what did I say to my kids and what am I saying now to my kids? And it can create a fair bit of stress. I think it's important to kind of have compassion for ourselves and really thinking about, one of the challenges with the messages that we've had in the past is there's this praising up of one particular body type and a vilification of another one. And that's one of the key things that have created struggles. So it's okay to want your child to be healthy. It's okay to kind of want the best for them, but also recognizing, hey, there's a way of protecting them, or there's ways of talking to them that is more helpful and that can kind of guide them in a better way than some of the messages we may have been exposed to as a kid.
Yeah, it's like that context of this kind of just keeps trickling down through the generations. And if you use that compassionate lens, it's like such a big part of the cultural context for all of us.
Yeah, and I think that generation effect is important to acknowledge, and it was one of the motivators I had for writing this book, because that's what I was seeing. I'm seeing this keep trickling down. We keep doing and saying the same things, and it's impacting generation after generation. So yeah, I can work with people when they come to me in therapy, or even sort of in writing this book. I can work with them with their struggles and help them learn different ways of interacting and reconnecting with what's important to them. But this problem's just going to keep coming. It's just going to be another person and another psychologist, or it's just going to keep happening unless we start taking steps to change the context, to change the environment that we live in, to change those messages that are happening at that broader level. Until we start kind of interrupting at that level, this is just going to keep going.
Okay, well, more about that later, because I want to ask you later your thoughts about your vision for the future and how this might change for the better on that cultural level. Yeah. But first, I want to ask about avoidance and control related to weight stigma. So I think, we're both ACT therapists, acceptance and commitment therapy oriented. And one of the things we talk a lot about in acceptance and commitment therapy is how we get into patterns of avoidance and control and how that can be problematic. And certainly when it comes to weight stigma, that can show up. So could you give some examples of that, what you see with that, and what the cost can be?
Absolutely. Yeah. So when we're surrounded by all of these messages about our bodies and sort of that stigmatized portrayal of the body, what starts to happen is we begin to view the body as a problem. So when I look in the mirror and I don't like what I see, my brain says, the body is the problem. And our brains, being the little fix-it machines that they are, it then moves to, I've got something that I've got a few ideas of what I can do about this problem. And so some of the ideas it moves to is it'll move into, I need to fix and change the body, or it'll move to, I need to hide it. So the fixing and changing the body is more of that, okay, I need to lose weight. I need to do something to alter my body in some way. And there's so many industries that make a lot of money when we're in that state. So it's like, if you do this, you will lose weight, whether it's a diet, whether it's an exercise plan, whether it's medication. Like, there's all these kind of fix-it solutions that we get thrown our way, and they do it in such a way that makes them seem like, oh, it's no big deal, it's easy. It's completely doable for you to lose that weight. So we then throw our energy into trying to lose weight, no matter which of the means that we're trying to choose. And often what happens when we're kind of getting into that, trying to do things to fix our body, we start to lose connection with other things that might be important to us. So an example might be our friends invite us out for dinner. It's like, oh, that's really nice. I really want to go, but I'm on a diet. So then it's like, okay, do I go to the dinner party and, be selective of what I eat because I'm on a diet? Or do I not go because there's nothing on that menu that I can eat? So, a person might go out for dinner, but as they're sitting there with their friends, they're focused on, what did I just eat? And they might be doing the calculations, or they might be like, oh, I can't believe I ate that, and they're kind of panicking. So they might be physically there, but mentally they're not connecting with the people around them. So going to this dinner and connecting with friends, they do it, but they're not really connecting with them. So that's an example of kind of at a more of a day-to-day sort of level of that pursuing the fixing can lead to a disconnection. At the level of avoiding, if we go into the looking at the mirror and be like, oh, I really don't like that, I need to fix it by avoiding, what can happen is we don't go to different things. We might not do different activities. Swimming is one that comes up a lot of the time in clinic and outside of the clinic, and there's a lot of people who are like, I won't go swimming. I won't take my kids to the beach, or I won't take my kids to the pool. That's something my partner will do because I don't feel comfortable. So again, there's that missing out of something, that creating of memories with people that are important to us, that we miss out on because we're pursuing that, more of avoiding as opposed to kind of experiencing.
Yeah, those are great examples. I was thinking as I was reading your book about how often people will avoid medical appointments because it's like, a lot of times they'll weigh you or they'll make a comment about how you need to lose weight or something like that. So that people sometimes think like, oh, I'll go to the doctor later when I have lost weight or something like that. And it's like, it's the cost, of course, of that is that, well, then you're not getting medical care that you need. And so if you care about your health and you want to have, your body to make sure that you're getting all of your medical needs taken care of and someone's giving you an exam every once in a while, like you miss out on that. Is that something that you've seen as well?
Absolutely. I've definitely sort of seen that. And when I hear some of the stories that people have experienced in whether it's going to a medical appointment or other things in their life, I'm like, well, geez, no wonder you don't want to go back. That sounds like it was an absolutely awful experience and really distressing. Of course you don't want to go back. That makes complete sense that you don't feel comfortable going back. And what's the impact of that? How has that then impacted you as far as how do you feel about your health? Like, where is that in relation to your values? But it's definitely something that comes up quite often for people.
I just remember Jill Stoddard, my co-host, gave an example in her book that just came out recently, Imposter No More, of Julie Lithgott-Haynes, who had been on the podcast before as well, who tells a story of that she had been shamed about her weight by a doctor when she was really young and didn't go to the doctor for years and years and years because she was so terrified of that happening again.
Yeah. And I think we can also judge ourselves, like when we catch ourselves doing those responses, we can judge ourselves for it and be like, oh, if health was really important to you, you'd go. And we can kind of kick ourselves again while we're down. So I think it's important to be compassionate when we do see those patterns, to be like, well, of course, it makes sense that I don't feel comfortable, I don't want to go, or I avoid going to those things.
Well, and one thing that's really important here, you write in your book about how these struggles, it's really not just the weight, right? That's not really the thing that's being avoided here or the struggle here. It's really about something else.
Yeah. So weight, so much has become attached to weight. And when we look at those messages that we've received throughout our lives, it's not just about weight. If weight had no currency, we wouldn't be having the reactions we have. Weight gets attached to person's health. Weight gets attached to their desirability. Weight gets attached to their activity levels. Weight gets attached to success. Weight gets attached to control. So when a person jumps on a scale or looks in the mirror or tries clothes on, they're not having a reaction to the weight or the body change alone. It's not like they look at the mirror and go, oh, I'm not happy with that, and it stays there. It goes to all of those other things that have come to be attached to weight. So all of these characteristics of self that aren't really connected to weight have become connected to weight through these social messaging. So we're having reactions and changing our behavior based on that. And then we look at that more environmental level of different interactions that people have had with other people, and even the environment that we live in, like sort of chairs and traveling and all of that kind of stuff. That has an impact on people. I want to lose weight because I don't want to have to face weight discrimination. I want to be able to go about and move around in this world and not get these environmental cues that make me feel like I don't belong and that I shouldn't be here. So when I see people and they're talking about, I want to lose weight, often it's more about what is attached to weight loss. Of when I lose weight, I will be more confident, more outgoing, more likable, more healthy, more in control, all of those things. And if I lose weight, I won't have to face these struggles that I face each day in terms of sort of just dealing with people's reaction and weight discrimination.
Yeah. And the emotional level too, right? I mean, just how we feel in these kinds of situations. And what might you say to someone about that, just in terms of like the emotional impact of weight stigma?
The emotional impact is huge. And I think sometimes when we're talking about body image and weight stigma, it can get dismissed of, oh, no one likes their body, that's normal sort of thing. But the intensity of the emotion, whether it's normal or not, whether multiple people experience or not, it is still really, really intense. That shame and embarrassment that can be encountered when people are experiencing kind of that discrimination and that stigma, it's an awful feeling. And it makes sense that when we experience these feelings, we're like, I don't want to ever experience this again. This is awful. I want to retreat. So having compassion is usually my go-to response with when people are talking about their experiences. It's like, yeah, this is really hard. And experiencing that shame that comes with this, it is very, very hard emotions to be sitting with.
Well, one thing that I've noticed sometimes there's this body positivity movement, right? Which I think is really an important one just in terms of being more accepting of different kinds of bodies. Sometimes I think people have noted, though, that it focuses a lot on loving your body no matter what, at least when it's taken to an extreme, right? Like, oh, no matter what size you are, you should feel good about yourself. You should be positive about your body, love your body. Do you think that that's realistic? Is it necessary in order to have a healthier relationship with your body and your body image to have that kind of positivity toward how you feel about your own body?
I think the body positivity movement comes from a place of really, really good intent. And for some people, they really connect with it and it really helps them on their journey. And it's like, that is great. I'm not going to take anything away from anyone, especially if it's helpful for them. But what I've observed for many people and I've experienced is it's just way too much of a jump. And they go for to think of, oh, loving my body no matter what size it is. And they're at the point where they're experiencing body hatred and they really can't stand being in their own skin. That is way, way, way too much of a jump for them even to mentally kind of comprehend, let alone be able to implement and do. And then that can create, struggles in and of itself. So people are like, why can't I just love my body? Why can't I be more positive? There must be something wrong with me because I'm not able to love my body no matter what size it is. So I think there's good intent behind it, but often it's not realistic, and sometimes it's not necessary as well. Like, we don't have to always love our bodies, and for most of us, we don't. Living in the world that we live in and being surrounded by the messages that we're surrounded by, the window of what's considered, I guess, an acceptable or the ideal is so narrow. And it, like we said earlier, it's ever changing. So chances are, at some point in our lives, we're going to look in the mirror and look at our bodies and go, I don't like that. And that doesn't mean that our bodies are bad or broken or in need of fixing, nor does it mean our minds are bad or broken or there's something wrong with us. It means we're human. We're human in an environment that is full of these messages that are really, really appearance focused. Of course, we're going to absorb it. And of course, that absorption is going to come out in how we might view our own bodies and how we view other people. So instead of it being like, I have to think positive about my body, it's like, no, I'm in this environment that we live in with the bodies that we have. Of course, there's going to be days that, I'm not going to like what I see or I'm not going to like what I experience. And that's okay. That doesn't mean I have to kind of fix it or do anything about it. This is a normal experience, a normal thought and feeling to have. And even just labeling it as that and giving ourselves that compassion, it can kind of create a little bit of space.
Yeah. It reminds me a little bit of when people maybe have a lot of self-criticism or shame or low self-esteem. And sometimes I think people think, well, the goal then is to just feel so good about yourself all the time and never have any negative thoughts about yourself. And it's like, yeah, that's great. But for most of us, that's not really going to stick. It's going to happen from time to time. So how might you bring in some of the acceptance part of acceptance and commitment therapy when those painful emotions arrive or when we aren't feeling so positive about our bodies? What are your thoughts about that approach, maybe as an alternative? How might you work with someone in that way?
I can see many, it comes up in many different levels. So, what I often see when people come and what things I've experienced myself is, usually people are distressed by having those thoughts as well, especially when they've been surrounded by this body positivity of you have to love your body. And so what they can experience is they first have the experience of their body and thoughts about their body, and then they start judging themselves for having the thoughts about their body. And, I've had that experience myself where, I've put on clothes that previously would fit me, no longer fit me. I have that negative critical voice come in about the body. And then it's followed by, come off it, Sarah, you've been working in this field for 15 years. You should know better. And then it spirals from there. With my clients, I've had a number of people say, I embrace body acceptance. If any of my friends are struggling with how they feel about their body, I'm really accepting. I'm right there with them. But when I look at that, how I speak to myself, it's completely different. I must be such a hypocrite for saying one thing and doing one thing with my friends, but then it's completely different applied to myself. So we kind of get kicked twice of the original body image thought, but then our reaction to the body image thought. So I guess sort of even being able to step back and have compassion and normalize, we live in the world that we live in. We're going to have these thoughts. We're surrounded by all these messages about good bodies and bad bodies. And of course, in the context of that, these thoughts and feelings are going to come up. And it doesn't mean our bodies are broken and in need of fixing. It doesn't mean we're a hypocrite or bad or vain or anything for having these thoughts and feelings. These are thoughts and feelings that are very normal in the context that we live in. So I guess when we're looking at that acceptance piece, it's building an acceptance of these thoughts and feelings are going to come up. And it makes sense that they come up in the world that we live in. So we don't need to fight to get rid of the thoughts, and we don't need to fight and struggle with our body. Our body isn't the problem. It's the world that we live in and the environment that we live in that has created this narrative that our body is a problem that we need to fix. So starting to separate it out and switching the focus of my body and my mind isn't the problem. What I experience is normal given the world that I live in. So even just doing that, it creates a space for us. And from that space, we can then look at it and go, okay, maybe I can do something differently. Now, if I stay with these thoughts and feelings, and I've done it myself. I've stayed with those thoughts, gone down that rabbit hole, felt miserable. I've thrown my energy into that. When I've done that, I haven't felt good. It's pulled me away from things that are important to me. Okay, if I stay with those thoughts and feelings and see my brain and my body as something that needs to be fixed, it doesn't take me to a good place. It doesn't bring me closer to who I want to be. It doesn't help the way I connect with people around me or the things that I do. Okay, so if it's not helpful that I go down that path, what's a more helpful path to go on? And then I can start thinking about, okay, well, what is important to me? What do I want to connect with? And then I might think about, okay, well, what's something I can do today that might bring me closer to that? And that creates a path of, okay, this is how I can make my day unfold differently based on just getting that little bit of separation from my thoughts.
There's so many important things you're talking about here. And I think one of the most important contributions of your book is that putting it in context so that you could say, well, you can be kinder to yourself, right? Like, of course you feel this way. Of course you feel this self-criticism or this embarrassment or whatever the case may be, given what you we're exposed to. So I think it really does foster self-compassion. And then that piece around values and taking action. And instead of letting that derail you from the things that matter to you, once you have that awareness and acceptance and compassion for yourself, this is your life to live. So what are you going to do with that? And I think that's a really important element of your book that we didn't really talk about much so far, which is around values. And instead of avoiding, if you really care about going to the pool and you've been avoiding it, maybe that's really something to think about in terms of what needs to change. Maybe it's not your body size. Maybe it's doing the things that matter to you.
And I think it's a trap that we fall into where we focus more on, okay, what needs to change is my body. And of course, we're going to fall into that trap because that's what we're told in the world that we're in. But what if we can pivot the way we interact with these messages that we've had? And instead of following them and be like, yeah, my body's the problem, what happens if we put it back out there and be like, no, that's a product of society. My body's not the problem. And I don't want to spend my time trying to fix my body or trying to hide it. I want to spend my time connecting with the people or activities that are important to me and making that shift.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy shift to make. I think sort of like, sometimes in acceptance and commitment therapy, we can kind of get put out there of, oh, just do it, do this. It's not easy to make that shift. So there's an element of building the ability to interact with our thoughts and feelings differently so that we can make that shift, so that we can connect with the things that are important to us.
Yeah. There's one piece I want to elaborate on a little bit more because you've talked about it, but I just want to really be specific about it. And that is around self-critical thoughts about our bodies and the way that we talk to ourselves about our bodies. And I imagine most of us have had that experience sometimes of being self-critical of our bodies. I know I have. And I think sometimes it's like constant, all day long. People can be really fixated on that, or we can just be almost like preoccupied by thinking about our bodies. So what words of wisdom or advice do you have for people who are just really constantly, if you could listen to their thoughts that are happening inside of their head, you would just be hearing a heavy theme of body criticism?
Yeah, and we can be so harsh with ourselves. There's no way in this world we'd ever say to other people what we're saying to ourselves. And I think for many of us, there's that perception that if I can change my body, I won't have these thoughts anymore. I think it's important to recognize that people of all body shapes and sizes have these thoughts. So it is like this really intense criticism that most of us do carry. And I think in terms of tips or sort of words of advice is even recognizing that a lot of us have that internal dialogue.
Yeah.
The way I kind of look at it is it's kind of like listening to the radio in the car, and sometimes something will come on the radio and it has my full attention and I'm really focused on it and it's kind of loud. And there's other times where if someone asked me, what was the song playing when you came in? I'd be like, I have absolutely no idea. It wasn't that the radio wasn't playing, but my attention to it was different. So what I do in therapy and sort of that ACT approach is it's building a person's ability to be able to shift their attention with those thoughts. So they could listen to the radio and really focus on those thoughts and they become really, really big and take up a lot of space. Or they can become background noise. The radio's still playing, but I'm not giving it my full attention. It's not dictating how I'm living my life or what I'm doing. It's just there. It's going to keep playing. I don't have to act on it. Whereas if we're giving it our full attention and listening to it, it can make it seem really, really loud and really important that I have to do something and I have to act on it. So we're just trying to build the ability to have those thoughts, but have them kind of come and go and our attention more focused on other things in our life. So kind of that attentional shifting away from those thoughts.
I think that's so helpful. For myself, I think even just that shift to noticing that that's what's happening. So I'll say to myself, like, wow, I'm being really harsh on my body today in my mind. And I'm like thinking to myself, my body really did not change much between yesterday and today. So I'm being self-critical. What's going on here? But I think even just framing it in that way and noticing it helps me just take a little step back from it, like you're saying, and give it less attention.
Yeah. It's like, oh, that same radio station's playing again. Like,
yeah.
Or the one I use is I'll sort of say to myself, that's my conditioning. There's those messages again. Okay. And just giving that label creates that little bit of space and a little bit of distance. And I can be like, well, what do I want to do with that? Do I want to keep listening? Do I want to follow my conditioning? Or do I want to do something different? And a lot of the time when I start putting that label in and creating that space, my mind's like, yeah, I want to do something different. I want to do something more fun.
This is not really how I want to focus my attention. Yeah. Okay. Last question here, because I know we've gone a while now. So I'm going to end on a big one though, because I'm kind of coming full circle to what we were saying earlier, which is this idea of what needs to change at the cultural level. And actually in the acknowledgments of your book, you say, this like gave me chills. May this book be written and read now so that it is in time no longer needed. And I was just thinking, like, wouldn't that be amazing if we didn't need a book like this? If we could get to a better place as a culture, as a society where weight discrimination, weight stigma weren't really a problem anymore. I'm curious, what would you like to see change in the future in our society? How would you like the narrative to change, and what would you like to see be different?
Yeah, it definitely finishing on a big one.
It's a big one.
It's a big one. And like a world peace sort of question.
We may need another hour.
But I think the world is way, way, way too focused on appearance. And we just take these little pieces of information that we get from appearance. And I talk about the realm of weight, but there's other aspects. You can look at race, you can look at gender, the same sort of stuff is unfolding. We get this little bit of micro information based on a person's appearance, and then it has such a huge impact of the way things unfold. And I think that's highly, highly problematic. So when I think of that, a future and how society can change, what I would love to see is less of a focus on appearance and moving away from that. So moving away from talking about people's weight, like saying someone's gained or lost weight shouldn't be a topic of conversation. Having environments that are inclusive and supportive of all shapes, sizes, and abilities, so that everyone can move around and do what they want to do without having to worry about, is the environment going to allow for this? Moving away from treating people differently based on their weight. So there's some of the things that I think we should be moving away from, is that weight focus. And I think we should be moving more towards connecting with each other at a human-to-human level, seeing each other for the complexity and richness that we are. We all have thoughts, feelings, and experiences that make up and have shaped who we are. And it does us a huge disservice when we just focus on appearance or focusing on weight. And what I'd like to hope would happen is the more that we're moving away from weight and appearance, and the more that we're connecting with kind of common humanity and richness and celebrating diversity, is that people would feel safer to put themselves out there and be themselves. And I think that would be such a huge gift, not only to the individual, but to the world. And I think so much potential could be unlocked by us creating that safe space for people to live their authentic lives and be who they want to be, and not have to worry about, do I look the right way?
Well, that is absolutely a beautiful vision for the future. And I think that books like yours make a big difference in changing the world in that direction. It's not easy. It's not going to happen in 5 minutes, but conversations like the one we're having today and books like yours, I think, really make people more aware, whether you've had a profound experience with this or not, I'm willing to bet that you know what Sarah's talking about here, and we can all do our part to move things in that direction. So Sarah will post our show notes. We'll post a link to your book and a link to your website so that people can find you and learn more. Thank you so much for writing this book. It really is a good one. I think our listeners are going to definitely want to check it out. And thank you so much for being here today and talking to us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to Psychologists Off the Clock. If you enjoy our podcast, you can help us out by leaving a review or contributing on Patreon.
You can get more psychology tips by subscribing to our newsletter and connecting with us on social media.
We'd like to thank our podcast production manager, Jadine Stout-Williams.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and is not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatment. If you're looking for mental health treatment, please visit the resources page of our website, offtheclockpsych.com.